4 American operators have spent 2 days climbing the mountain to reach the observation point. From there, they can see the entire Milawa Valley in eastern Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden dreams of fighting his final battle there in the Tora Bora mountains. Across the boulder field at the bottom of the valley and up the mountain slopes stretches a network of trenches, bunkers, and fortified caves. Al-Qaeda's fighters have built a perfect fortress. But the men of the CIA's Jawbreaker team are true hunters. Their Afghan guides secure the approaches to the summit, while the team leader, Joe O'Keefe, an Air Force combat controller, prepares the deadliest weapon they have, a SOFLAM laser designator. He sights on a bunker several kilometers away and paints it with the laser, turning it into a target. A few minutes later, a 2,000-pound paveway bomb falls directly on the mark. 2 Navy F-14 Tomcats drop more laser-guided bombs following his directions. Then a fully loaded B-1B Lancer bomber joins in, and before long, dozens of aircraft are operating over Tora Bora, all coordinated by a single man. The U.S. intervention in Afghanistan began on the 7th of October 2001, less than a month after the September 11 attacks. In a matter of weeks, a small group of American and Allied special forces, working alongside anti-Taliban militias, managed to topple the Taliban government and take Kabul. But the world's most wanted man, Osama bin Laden, remains at large. Intelligence believes that surviving Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders are falling back to Tora Bora, near the Pakistani border, an area that for years has served as a training ground and haven for bin Laden's organization. The mission to hunt him down first falls to the Jawbreaker team, made up of field officers from the Counter-Terrorism Center and the CIA's Secret Special Activities Division. The group is led by Officer Gary Berntson, who delegates the operation to a detachment known as Jawbreaker Juliet, commanded by a Texan and former Marine known only as George. For George and his men, the setting is as awe-inspiring as it is treacherous. And narrow paths, where only a column of mules can squeeze through with ammunition, water, and extra radios. Every request for air support depends on batteries drained by the cold and radio links that can be cut off by a simple shift of the wind in the mountain passes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the valley, inside the caves, Al-Qaeda fighters listen to the dull roar of the explosions and answer with intermittent mortar and heavy machine gun fire. They know the sky belongs to the United States, but they trust that stone, altitude, and winter fog will work in their favor. In Washington, on the other hand, people want fast results. The White House wants bin Laden's head as tangible proof that the war on terror has begun in earnest. In the Tora Bora Mountains, that political pressure is distilled into a single order for Jawbreaker Juliet. Do not let him escape. The entire strategy of U.S. Central Command is based on using as few American troops as possible in Afghanistan, so local fighters are expected to take the lead. Jawbreaker Juliet arrives in Jalalabad to link up with an allied militia leader named Hazrat Ali, who has successfully resisted the Taliban for the last 5 years. Haji Zaman also joins them, recently returned from exile in Paris, and claiming he can raise 1,000 men. The two Afghans belong to different tribes and eye each other with deep mistrust, since both want to gain political power in post-Taliban Afghanistan, and that rivalry sometimes seems more important than finding bin Laden. This fragile coalition is known as the Eastern Alliance, and it is Jawbreaker's responsibility to hold it together. On December 4, Hazrat Ali launches an attack without prior coordination. Al-Qaeda's fighters, posted in observation positions on the high ground, respond from a superior vantage point, and Ali's forces are driven back by devastating fire from mortars and T-62 tanks. Intelligence services are convinced that Al-Qaeda's leadership, and possibly bin Laden himself, is entrenched in the valley. The Taliban may be disorganized, but they are still highly experienced fighters. At that moment, Al-Qaeda was the most dangerous terrorist group in the world, made up of deeply committed jihadists from across the Islamic world. No one knows exactly how many men are defending Tora Bora's cliffs and caves. Estimates range from 300 to 3,000. By contrast, the fighters of the Eastern Alliance, now encircling the Tora Bora Mountains, have little appetite for battle. To make matters worse, many of Haji Zaman's men had previously been paid to help build Al-Qaeda's fortifications in the valley and still feel a certain sympathy for bin Laden. So, while the Green Berets go into action, Zaman sends some of his men into Tora Bora to warn bin Laden of the coming attack, giving him 3 days to surrender or flee. Zaman believes he is acting according to his duty as a Pashtun, a traditional code of honor that the Americans do not understand at all. That mix of overlapping loyalties to clan, tribe, Pashtun honor, CIA money, and in some cases, to bin Laden himself, turns every meeting in Jalalabad into a murky chess match for the Americans. Jawbreaker officers hand out bundles of dollars, radios, and vague promises of future political influence, but they are never sure how much of their message actually translates into action on the ground. As planes keep roaring over the mountains and bombs kick up great plumes of dust, American commanders begin to suspect that their bet on Afghanizing the battle carries a hidden cost. They have ceded the initiative to allies whose main priority is not capturing bin Laden, but surviving the war and positioning themselves as well as possible for the day after. Every hour that passes without a tight cordon around the valley opens another door in the rocky border with Pakistan, a door through which the enemy could vanish without a trace. Berntsen fears that bin Laden will escape over the mountains into Pakistan and does not trust his new allies to stop him. He requests the deployment of 800 U.S. Army Rangers to block the mountain passes, but the request is denied. General Tommy Franks, head of CENTCOM, worries that sending so many American troops will alienate their Afghan allies. He knows that a massive foreign troop presence can trigger old reflexes of resistance among the local population and give the Taliban new propaganda material, as they have long portrayed themselves as defenders against foreign occupation. Among the maps and screens at his headquarters, Franks sees numbers and arrows. In Tora Bora, Berntsen sees escape routes wide open. Even so, Jawbreaker is not entirely alone. The team receives reinforcements from Task Force 11. Under the command of Major Thomas Greer, this force consists of about 40 operators, mostly from the U.S. Army's premier Special Operations Unit, Delta Force, plus 12 men from the United Kingdom's Secret Special Boat Service. They are specialists in high-risk missions, used to moving in small teams, at night, in hostile terrain, and then disappearing without a trace. As they gather in Hazrat Ali's headquarters, set up in a school on the northern slopes, George insists they must attack now. Every day that passes gives bin Laden more time to escape. But the self-styled General Ali hesitates. He calls for more airstrikes and fears that if any of the newly arrived Special Forces soldiers are killed, the Americans will end up blaming him. Major Greer assures him that Delta Force knows how to take care of itself. To persuade him, George proposes using the largest bomb in the U.S. arsenal, the BLU-82 Daisy Cutter, to kick off the attack, and also offers him a substantial sum of money as an incentive. In that mix of pressure, promises, and stacks of cash lies the essence of America's strategy in eastern Afghanistan. Buy loyalties, amplify the psychological effect of the bombs, and push their allies to advance a few more yards over ground they know far better. As the Eastern Alliance prepares for the next day's operation, bin Laden sleeps peacefully in a bunker at the bottom of the valley. He earned his reputation fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan in the 1,980 seconds, and the Arab press glorified him after the relatively small Battle of Jaji. The Sheikh, as his men call him, is convinced he can repeat that victory. But his dream turns into a nightmare when he sees, frozen in terror, a deadly scorpion crawling into his shelter. He wakes up with a start. Deeply religious, he interprets the dream as a sign of danger and abandons the bunker. His bodyguards, accustomed to his silences and abrupt decisions, quickly gather their few belongings and move deeper into the maze of caves, certain that God has spoken through this nocturnal vision. At dawn on December 9th, Hazrat Ali, George, and other fighters gather on a ridge in an atmosphere thick with tension and expectation. They hold their breath as an MC-130 combat Talon flies over the valley. From its rear ramp, it drops the Daisy Cutter. The massive 15,000-pound bomb explodes, and the blast wave lashes the valley like a whip. About 500 meters of ground are completely scorched, and shrapnel falls kilometers away. Several insurgents who had just stepped out of their caves were caught in the explosion. The bunker complex vanishes. CIA analysts had dreamed of a blow like this, a single device able to wipe out fortified positions that would otherwise have cost dozens of lives in a conventional assault. Osama bin Laden watches the scene in shock. The Americans have no idea how close they came to him. However, several kilometers away, the Daisy Cutter is far less impressive. All people see is a cloud of dust and hear a distant boom. Ali and his men are disappointed. They had expected an immense fireball. Worse still, Afghan radios fill with nervous messages. Several militiamen ignored the danger zone and were too close to the bomb. Ali's faith in American firepower takes a serious hit. In his eyes, the most feared weapon in the U.S. arsenal has been little more than an expensive, inaccurate thunderclap, incapable of tipping the balance once and for all. Even so, George secures more air support. In less than an hour, 3 B-52 Stratofortress bombers arrive and seed the hillsides with more than 100 Mark 82 bombs. The ground shakes, the passes fill with dust and the echo of explosions, and the line between covering fire and massacre becomes blurred. But the general decides to postpone the attack another day. Each delay reopens the argument between Americans and Afghans, between those who see time as a tactical window closing fast and those who treat it as space to negotiate, survive, and weigh their own risks. In that space of doubt, bin Laden still has a chance to get away. Finally, on December 10, the long-awaited assault begins. With only 5 minutes' notice, Major Greer sends 3 men: Hopper, team leader, Admiral, an Air Force combat controller, and Adam Khan, a CIA translator and former Marine. Their orders are clear. Go wherever the general goes, call in close air support, and kill as many Al-Qaeda fighters as they can. Air power in that sector of the front, a tiny but lethal spearhead embedded in a mass of poorly disciplined Afghan militiamen. They are given the call sign Jackal Team. Their old Toyota bounces up the mountain road until they catch up with the Eastern Alliance column. The engine complains on every turn, strained by the load and the slope. The Afghan convoy grinds to a halt, exposed in the middle of the road, while a T-55 tank tries to shove a broken self-propelled anti-aircraft gun off to the side. Khan doesn't like what he sees and moves the Toyota to a protected area. He has years of experience in the Marine Corps and knows that traffic jams in the mountains are magnets for enemy artillery. Too much noise, too much time sitting still, and too many men packed into the wrong place. They have barely stepped out of the vehicle when Al-Qaeda mortar fire starts to rain down. The 3 Americans hit the dirt as Afghan militiamen ran in panic, unsure what to do. One group huddles together in a tight bunch until an 82mm shell bursts right in the middle of them. The blast kicks up rocks, dust, and screams. And within seconds, the road is full of wounded men no one is treating. After several extremely tense minutes, the tank finally manages to push the gun off the road and the column moves on. General Ali, however, is nowhere to be seen. With no clear leadership, the Americans try to organize stray groups of Afghans as best they can. Interpreters, old tribal grudges, and local warlords who only obey when it suits them. A well-placed Al-Qaeda PKM machine gun halts the advance. The militia hides behind rocks in big, easy-to-hit groups, firing their Kalashnikovs and RPGs almost blindly, just in the enemy's general direction. Their way of fighting is more show than effectiveness. It impresses the many Western journalists roaming the country, but it doesn't change the outcome. For Hopper and his teammates, every wild burst only gives away positions and wastes ammunition they'll later wish they had. Meanwhile, Delta Force lives by a different motto: speed, surprise, and violence of action. Admiral guides a pair of Navy F-18 seconds onto the machine gun nest. He marks the target with surgical precision, speaking in a code of acronyms and coordinates that the Afghans don't understand. But that decides who lives and dies on the hillside. A volley of 1,000-pound JDAM bombs wipes it off the map. Rocks cascade down the slope as the Americans charge forward. Khan manages to persuade a group of Afghans to go with him. But as the sun sinks, more and more Eastern Alliance fighters drift away, heading back down the mountain. The cold bites harder, the promise of combat mingles with fatigue, and many men decide they have risked enough for one day. At the school that serves as headquarters, Radio operators intercept a startling message. Bin Laden is surrounded. By listening to Al-Qaeda's traffic, they manage to pinpoint his location to within about 10 meters, but he is on the move. The voice on the other end sounds agitated, talking about ammunition, retreat, about the Sheikh shifting from cave to cave. George and Major Greer look at each other without needing to speak. 33 Delta Force operators lock and load, climb into their vehicles, and tear up the mountain like hunting dogs just loosed from the leash. They know that. Rarely in modern history has anyone been this close to killing the world's most wanted man. As they rattle up the dirt road, they pass a column of trucks and Toyotas coming down. The lead vehicle stops, and General Ali politely greets the Delta officer. Neither he nor his guide seems to grasp the gravity of the moment. They talk about logistics, tired men, and coming back tomorrow. As quickly as they appeared, they disappear again down into the valley. For a brief second, in that dusty roadside encounter, two visions of war cross paths. One obsessed with snapping the trap shut, the other resigned to the idea that the prey will always find another way out through the mountains. The Pashtun guides immediately understand what is happening. It is the holy month of Ramadan, and the Eastern Alliance has left the front to break the fast. According to Islamic tradition, Muslims fast during daylight hours and eat with their families at sunset. For the Afghan militiamen, neither war nor the hunt for the world's most wanted terrorist changes that. For the American commanders, it is another cultural collision they had not anticipated. In the situation reports sent to Kabul and Tampa, they speak of regrouping and adjustments on the front line. But on the ground, the reality is simpler. The men have decided that, between dying in the dark and sitting down to dinner with their families, tonight they're going to eat. Jackal team is left almost completely alone, trapped behind enemy lines. Suddenly, bursts of green tracer rounds start cracking around them. Unsure whether they are coming from nervous allies or Al-Qaeda fighters trying to encircle them, the three operators hide among some trees. Out of all the Eastern Alliance men, only 5 remain. The tribal militiamen fire wildly into the darkness until Adam Khan, furious, orders them to stop. Reminding them they are giving away their position, he yells at them in Pashto that their bullets are like torches in the sky, invitations for enemy mortars to find their mark. Some lower their weapons reluctantly. Others understand only the tone of his voice, not his words. Hopper tries to calm them down by showing them his night vision goggles, almost like a magic trick. He shows them how the night turns green and sharp, how they can see before being seen, hoping to buy a bit of discipline in exchange for that small technological miracle. Admiral tries to direct the fire of an AC-130 spooky gunship onto the machine gun behind them, but low clouds hide the target. Without air support, Hopper makes a decision. He uses the code word Warpath, signaling to the rest of the force that they are surrounded and are going to try to fight their way out. Then they hug the rock wall and slip into the darkness. Every step is a calculation. Noise or silence, speed or stealth, trust or paranoia. Further down the mountain, tracer rounds begin to burst around Task Force 11. As they dive for cover, they realize the fire is not aimed at them. Al-Qaeda fighters, on the ridges and hilltops, are shooting at something else. No one knows exactly what, but it is clear they have not detected the Delta group moving right beneath them. For Greer and his men, it is like advancing under a thunderstorm, rumbling a few meters overhead. All sound, all danger, but still no direct hit. The Warpath call forces Major Greer to make a crucial decision. He had planned to link up with the Eastern Alliance, which supposedly had bin Laden surrounded, but that force is nowhere in sight. He has 2 options. Head for the position where they believe bin Laden is, about 2,500 meters away, or go find his own men, lost in a mountain range full of enemies and of unreliable allies. He finally decides, there will be another chance at bin Laden. We have to get our guys back first. That sentence, tossed off almost in passing, will haunt him as an irreparable fork in the road. The hunter's duty versus the commander's duty. They move quietly through the chaos toward Jackal Team's last known position, ignoring the crump of mortars and the constant crackle of gunfire around them. Greer's force picks up the team's radio traffic and manages to locate them. Hopper, Admiral, and Khan are safe. They have managed to push forward by bribing and negotiating their way through stragglers from the Eastern Alliance. Only 2 Afghans are still with them. The rest have slipped back down into the valley, swallowed by the night and their own priorities. With Task Force 11 reunited, they head down the mountain toward the school headquarters, but it is a night Major Thomas Greer will reproach himself for the rest of his life. Every bend in the descent feels like a step backward. Every meter lost is a gift to the enemy. In his mind, he rewrites the plan again and again, searching for the point where everything might have turned out differently. After having yielded overnight all the ground gained from Qaeda, the Eastern Alliance goes back on the offensive on December 11. Both General Ali and Haji Zaman have their eyes on Hill 2685. Each warlord holds his own press conference at the foot of the mountains for the international media and then leads his men in a race to the top, supported by a steady stream of airstrikes. For them, taking that height means not only gaining a tactical position, but also a photo, a headline, and perhaps a future role in the new Afghanistan being negotiated while the bombs keep falling. Hornet and Tomcat aircraft from carriers in the Gulf of Oman, along with B-1 and B-52 bombers flying out of Diego Garcia, take turns without rest. They drop precision-guided bombs on any target the Green Berets designate and then peel away. Al-Qaeda fighters answer by firing RPGs into the sky to no effect. The planes are flying thousands of meters above, far out of range. For the American operators, the war has become an almost mechanical choreography: locate, mark, destroy. For the men on the ground, however, every pass by the bombers is a small earthquake that rattles their bones. Zaman's men reach the top of Hill 2685 first and clear Al-Qaeda's trenches with surprising ferocity. A dejected Ali remains in control of the lower ridges around the peak, but the loss of the hill, combined with the relentless bombing, begins to undermine bin Laden's confidence. Among the remains of abandoned positions, Zaman's Afghans find soaked blankets, half-empty backpacks, and frozen bread. Signs of an improvised withdrawal rather than an orderly retreat. For Al-Qaeda fighters, poorly equipped and poorly supplied, conditions are dreadful. Snow falls non-stop, and temperatures hover around 10 degrees below zero. Almost all their water has frozen. Lighting campfires would be like sending a signal flare directly to U.S. bombers. Many try to melt snow on small stoves. Others pass around almost empty canteens, listening to the distant hum of engines overhead. Despite the image some media paint of vast underground complexes, the fortifications cannot withstand the pounding from the air, and casualties mount. Wounded men die overnight from injuries that, under other circumstances, would be treatable. Al-Qaeda has only one doctor, so short of supplies that he is forced to operate with nothing more than scissors. His improvised operating rooms are damp caves lit by flashlights, with reused bandages and painkillers rationed to the last tablet. Coalition forces hear bin Laden broadcasting a bleak message over the radio. "If you can no longer hold out, you may surrender with my blessing." The situation weighs heavily on him. With explosions echoing through the mountains, he sits down to write his will. He thanks his 4 wives for their support and asks his children's forgiveness for his absences. He begs them not to follow his path of jihad and to stay away from Al-Qaeda. Between the lines creeps, for the first time, the shadow of defeat. An implicit admission that the battle he had imagined as his great triumph may end up being his most humiliating flight. Determined not to repeat the previous night's disaster, Major Greer organizes a special force to seize and hold key observation points. The first site is named MSS Grinch, Mission Support Site, Grinch, commanded by a man known only as Sergeant Major Jim. It is composed of 25 Delta operators and 4 SBS men, with an assault element and snipers. Their mission is to push deeper into the mountains and take over the forward air control duties previously handled by the Green Berets. Grinch is not just a lookout, it is the new brain of the battlefield, the place where eyes in the snow connect with jet engines roaring hundreds of kilometers away. When Grinch links up with Zaman's men on Hill 2685, Army Special Forces notch one last victory. They locate Al-Qaeda's troublesome mortars with their thermal sights, calculate their position, and guide an orbiting AC-130 gunship onto them. They watch with satisfaction as the airstrike triggers secondary explosions in the mortar positions. Every flash they see through their optics means fewer shells falling on the ridges they are struggling to hold. Unbeknownst to the Americans, Zaman and Al-Qaeda are negotiating. They are unaware that, for many Afghan warriors, the traditional way to end a battle is to agree on conditional surrender. The enemy hands over his weapons and is allowed to leave. For Zaman, letting those men melt away through passes and ravines to the border is not betrayal, but an honorable outcome in line with codes that existed long before CIA dollars or B-52 bombers showed up. For the Americans, that same logic will open the door through which their primary target can escape. On the morning of December 12, Adam Khan, at MSS Grinch, hears on Afghan radios that a ceasefire has been arranged and that the Americans are not to advance. The message hops from frequency to frequency, padded with rumors and half-truths, but the core is the same. Stop. Furious, Sergeant Major Jim orders his men to move out, but Zaman's fighters surround them, pointing their Kalashnikovs. For a few seconds, every barrel is aimed in the wrong direction. Khan manages to defuse the situation, shouting translations with his hands in the air, reminding the militiamen that these short-bearded, oddly helmeted men are the very ones who have been calling down bombs on their enemies. Still, Zaman insists that the team stay put. News of the ceasefire spreads quickly. Jawbreaker Commander Gary Bernson, the CIA officer with bin Laden practically within reach, roars over the radio. No ceasefire, no negotiation. We continue with the airstrikes. In his mind, each minute of truce is another open road toward Pakistan. He pictures the mental map of Tora Bora and, where others see snow-covered mountains, he sees nothing but escape, routes. The Americans already suspect Zaman. They believe that in previous days, he allowed Al-Qaeda fighters to slip away unmolested. Khan and Jim press him for answers. They remind him of the columns of men that vanished into the night, of rumors of closed-door talks, of awkward silences on local radio. Zaman tells them the ceasefire will last until 17 to give Al-Qaeda's men time to come down from the mountains. But it later emerges that he has told the press there will be another ceasefire until 8 a.m. on the 13th. The Americans refuse to accept that. To them, those extra hours translate into kilometers gained by the enemy. Zaman goes to the school headquarters to meet with George and Greer, who are just as angry. 5 o'clock comes. The mountain passes are empty. No one surrenders. There are no columns of prisoners, no piles of surrendered weapons, no improvised white flags made from scarves. Only snowy trails lead off toward Pakistan. At MSS Grinch, operators grip their M4 rifles. Jim, his expression hard, warns the Afghan commander, "Do not point your weapons at us." It is a short sentence, but it carries a very clear threat. The next exchange of looks will not be a warning. Within minutes, the American and British troops are back in the fight. Divided into 4-man teams, Grinch's men move across ridges and valleys, calling in JDAM strikes on every remaining pocket of resistance. Each team is a small node of destruction, a couple of radios, thermal sights, laser designators, and a lot of practice in calling fire from the sky. One team comes under fire from a D-K heavy machine gun, its 50 caliber rounds smashing into the jagged rocks along a narrow ridge. Fighting the first symptoms of altitude sickness, the soldiers dive to the ground as one of the SBS commandos calls for a 1,000-pound GBU-32 guided bomb from a fighter orbiting overhead. The cold bites their hands even through gloves. Their breathing is short and ragged, but the voice on the radio is steady, almost flat. Coordinates, altitude, markers. A few minutes later, the mountain answers with a single thunderclap. The D-K problem ceases to exist. Despite how infuriating the ceasefire episode with the Eastern Alliance has been, the Americans have some reason for optimism. The mere fact that Al-Qaeda is negotiating means it is cornered, but it also means that bin Laden and other leaders may try to escape. Every talk of truce sounds, to them, like a smokescreen. Delta Force urges Central Command to use airdropped mines to seal the passes into Pakistan, but the idea is rejected. In Tampa, political and humanitarian concerns weigh more heavily than the urgency of the encirclement. 8 more SBS commandos, and an MI6 officer arrive to support Haji Zaman. Behind closed doors, the British officer makes it very clear to Zaman that a repeat of his earlier behavior will not be tolerated. The tone is polite, almost diplomatic, but the message is unmistakable. Building on MSS Grinch's success, Major Greer sets up a new site, MSS Monkey. This unit advances along the western side of the mountains and relieves the Green Berets at Cobra Bravo. Greer is excited about the idea of redeploying ODA 572 elsewhere, but the team is pulled out of the area immediately. In a war where everything seems improvised on the ground, strategic decisions still arrive from very far away, sometimes aligned with the reality of the mountains, and sometimes, as in Tora Bora, completely out of step. Signals analysts once again pick up bin Laden's voice on the radio, but this time he is not speaking live. It is only a recorded sermon. The message sounds solemn, full of religious quotes and references to ancient battles, but for American specialists, it has a cold, technical meaning. If it is a recording, the Sheikh is probably no longer there. Even so, on the headquarters maps, any trace of his voice still marks a red dot over the mountains. On December 14, heavy clouds and snow made U.S. airstrikes difficult. The battle turns into brutal, close quarters fighting to wipe out the last pockets of fanatical Al-Qaeda fighters holding out in dozens of caves and hideouts. Their sacrifice buys them something extremely valuable: time. They move from cavern to cavern, dragging their wounded, firing from tiny cracks in the rock, and forcing the Green Berets and Delta operators to clear each position almost house to house, cave to cave. Meanwhile, Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders scramble over snowy mountain passes under the sharp peaks of the Svingar Range to cross safely into Pakistan. These are the very passes Bernsen wanted to block with U.S. Army Rangers, and the same passes Delta Force had wanted to mine from the air. Bernsen estimates that at least 200 Al-Qaeda fighters managed to escape into Pakistan. In his later reports, that figure is more than just a number. It is the measure of a missed opportunity, of a trap that nearly snapped shut but stayed open over a few kilometers of unsecured ground. When the weather clears on the 15th, Task Force 11 rushes to claw back lost ground. MSS Grinch advances with General Ali's men until they stop on a ridge. They refuse to move forward until the DSHK machine gun on the opposite crest is destroyed. The weapon has not fired for hours and has already been hit once, but the Afghans will not budge and sit down to wait. Some even start smoking hashish. For the American operators, used to squeezing every minute of daylight, this pause seems like an incomprehensible luxury in the middle of a pursuit. 3 Delta Force snipers, Murph, Scrawny, and John Shrek McPhee, carefully descend the dangerous slope and flank to the east. From a new observation point, Scrawny spots an Al-Qaeda fighter about 800 meters away, firing an RPG. He rests his SR-25 rifle on the man's silhouette, then thinks better of it. To avoid giving away his position, he and Shrek call in air support from a U fighter orbiting overhead, and a GPS-guided bomb takes out the lone enemy. In the silence after the blast, the 3 shooters once again melt into the rock, invisible to anyone looking from the other side of the valley. After that, the team destroys the DSHK position yet again with another airstrike, prompting General Ali's forces to move forward, if only a little. Every meter gained costs hours of arguments, radio calls, and new displays of air power. For Ali, American fire support is a resource to be used sparingly. For Greer, it is the only way to keep up the momentum of an ally who always seems on the verge of stopping. Later, that same day, a very agitated Afghan commander reports that a tall man about as tall as bin Laden's 6'6", 1.98 meters, with a large escort, has entered a nearby cave. From their new position, listening in on radio traffic, MSS Grinch realizes it has that cave network in view. Suddenly, everything lines up. The local commander's story, fragments of intercepted messages, the escape routes leading toward the border. Admiral reacts instantly. He calls up every available aircraft. From all over Afghanistan and the Arabian Sea, dozens of planes prepare to receive orders. F-15E Strike Eagle fighter bombers from the U.S. Air Force in Kuwait. Navy Tomcats and Hornets, lifting off from the carriers Kitty Hawk, Theodore Roosevelt, and Carl Vinson. along with B-1B Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress bombers flying out of Diego Garcia. In a matter of minutes, the sky over Tora Bora fills with invisible rings of steel and kerosene, all waiting for exact coordinates that might, at last, settle accounts with the most wanted man on the planet. Within minutes, the aircraft are stacked in the sky, one above another every 1,000 feet, waiting for the word. On the hilltop, the tension is palpable when the first "weapons away" comes over the radio. MSS Grinch may be about to kill Osama bin Laden. Explosions tear into the landscape. The first 2,000-pound JDAMs slam into the marked coordinates. Open fighting positions are obliterated in minutes. Other JDAMs with BLU-109 penetrator warheads punch through solid rock and explode inside the tunnels as Grinch's men shift their SOFLAM laser designators to fresh targets. Admiral can barely make himself heard on the radio, drowned out by the constant thunder of blasts echoing overhead. GBU-12 Paveway laser-guided bombs drop from the wings of Navy jets at over 30,000 feet, homing straight in on cave entrances. The pressure wave from the explosions races down the tunnels, killing those hiding inside. For Al-Qaeda fighters, stepping outside means certain death. All they can do is huddle in the darkness as the American bombardment pummels the mountain without pause. The largest caves are struck again and again. Rock collapses and seals the entrances, burying alive everyone inside. Several B-1B Lancers and B-52 seconds empty their bomb bays over the peaks. From beneath the crumbling slopes, secondary explosions can be seen. It is stored ammunition going up. A blinding flash marks the blast of a major weapons cache, and burning fragments tumble across the valley. Only after a full 2 hours of bombing does the attack stop. Dust and smoke begin to thin in the fading light. Fires still burn here and there, painting the darkening sky with orange flickers. Admiral has no targets left. Afghan fighters scatter, as always, while MSS Grinch prepares for yet another long, freezing night in the mountains. By the 17th of December 2001, the Battle of Tora Bora is over. The last exhausted Al-Qaeda fighters surrender. No one in the U.S. government knows for sure where bin Laden and his closest associates are. Many hope he died under the rubble and has simply not been identified. Another Green Beret team is sent to search the slopes and examine the bodies, but turns up nothing. They comb the area of the massive December 15 airstrike with special care, but find no human remains matching bin Laden's DNA. After Tora Bora, policymakers in Washington began to shift their narrative. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld claims that no one was ever completely certain that bin Laden was there. Yet personnel at Central Command remember he called at least once a day to ask, "Have you got him?" But bin Laden was there. According to journalist and counter-terrorism expert Peter Bergen, on the night of December 12, when the ceasefire silenced the battlefield, the Sheikh and 2 of his sons quietly left their bunker and slipped out of Tora Bora unnoticed. Keeping a very low profile and with no bodyguard escort, they traveled about 50 kilometers. They did not flee to Pakistan as everyone assumed, but, surprisingly, headed north to the Afghan city of Jalalabad, behind coalition lines. There he hid in the house of an old friend, a warlord named Awal Ghul. From that refuge, bin Laden rode on horseback some 160 kilometers to a remote spot in Kunar province, where he went to ground for several weeks, protected by another old comrade from the war against the Soviets. On the 15th of April 2002, the Arab network Al Jazeera broadcast a tape confirming what the entire world feared. Osama bin Laden is still alive and in good health. It is the final confirmation of the failure at Tora Bora, a failure that launches a manhunt that will last 10 years.